but maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, or if you've been reading things on the internet or older books about this place, what you would understand is that the people who lived here were the Anasazi. In about 1300, they just disappeared and left all their things here. Well, what we know now is they did not disappear. They migrated. Their descendants are alive and well, and they are the people who live in the pueblos in New Mexico along the Rio Grande River, places like Acoma and Laguna and Santa Clara and Taos and Santo Domingo, and also the Hopi people in northeast Arizona. Those are all the descendants of the people who once lived here. So because we can talk to those descendants, we can learn some things they will share with us. They won't share everything with us, it's part of their culture. But the one thing they asked of us is to not call their ancestors Anasazi. Anasazi is a Navajo name, and they are not related to the Navajo. So they have asked us to use, at this point, because they are so many different villages and they have each called themselves something different, we're using the umbrella term Ancestral Pueblo. And what indeed you're seeing is these places, many of them are named for saints in Spanish. Santa Clara, San Ildefonso. They're beginning to change their names to what they call themselves. So, for example, what used to be the Pueblo San Juan is now Oke Owinge. So watch that map of New Mexico to change over time as they change over to what they call themselves, not what the Spanish called them. So I think eventually, if you come back in about 20 years or so, I probably won't be here, but but I'm going to guess we might have a different umbrella term other than Ancestral Pueblo. Does anyone have any idea why I think that?
Spanish word.
It's a Spanish word, exactly. We are no longer using that Navajo term, and they're changing from those Spanish names, and I imagine eventually we will not have a Spanish name for them in collective also. So come back in 20 years, see what our story is. So they did indeed leave everything here. They left everything here because they were migrating, starting as a little trickle in the early 1200s, and as the 1200s went on, started to pick up, so that by 1300, everyone was gone. It wasn't a mass evacuation like from fire or flood or invasion or anything like that, but it was a slow migration down to these areas, either Arizona or New Mexico. So because they were leaving in the 1200s, this was a 200 years plus before the Spanish got here, with horses and donkeys and mules and carts with wheels and things like that. So they had no beasts of burden, they had no wheeled vehicles, so they were walking. So if you're migrating to a new home, 100, 150 miles away, what are you going to carry? Not a lot, that's for sure. Food, water, maybe a cooking pot, maybe some farming tools to get started in the new place, maybe some hunting implements to be able to catch game along the way.
Maybe your kids.
Maybe your kids. Maybe. I know if it were up to me, and if I were able to do it, I'd wait a few years until they could walk themselves. But that's me. That's just me. The other thing that I also think about, I have been learning to weave, and do a lot of fiber work. And the thing that I find really intriguing is among the things that they had here was they would have turkey feather blankets or robes. And turkey feather blankets or robes are made on strips of skin that are horizontal and then vertical to make a lattice work, and then the turkey feathers are twisted onto those. And they did the research, it would take about 11,500 turkey feathers to make one turkey feather blanket. You can bet if I made one of those, I'd take it with me.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to make another one. So obviously the very important things, but all the beautiful pottery that this area is known for, that's why there's so much here. They couldn't possibly carry all that with them, and so they were able to make new pots once they got to where they were going. So those descendants, those people still alive today, they often come back to these dwellings to visit their ancestors. we often talk about the fact that the Pueblo people settled here, and one of the reasons they stayed somewhat settled is they were farmers, and they were farming corn, beans, and squash. Now, I grew up in Indiana, and I look across, and I'm like, where the heck were you growing the corn? Which is like, I have no idea where the corn might have possibly been grown here. Well, first of all, you need to discard that image that I just gave you of miles and miles of cornfields in the Midwest. They did a different way of farming. So farmers care about three things. And it's not what it looks like, but what they know about the environment. They care about good soil, they care about enough water, and they care about a good climate for growing their crops. So of those things, they're all favorable to corn, beans, and squash here. So the first one is the soil. So we're up here at 7,000 feet. Mesa Verde kind of sticks up from the surrounding landscape. And our prevailing winds come from the west. If you've come through Arizona and especially Utah, you've seen a lot of red dirt. And so that red dirt gets dusty, and if you've ever been here for a good dust storm, the sky turns red. And so the winds pick up that dust, they're carrying it this way. When they hit Mesa Verde, they slow down because they've hit an obstacle. They drop that dust on the top of the mesa here. This creates, over thousands of years of that, a soil called loess, which is basically wind-blown soil. In some places, it's up to 4 to 6 feet thick up here on top of the mesas. If you came down 491 from Utah through Dove Creek and Pleasant View, in that area, you saw all those bean fields and alfalfa fields growing in that really red dirt. Excellent farming soil. It's great, it holds water really well, it stands up really well, it doesn't get real muddy, clays stick together kind of things. It's great farming soil, and it's up here on top of the mesas too. Water. Now, water, we get about 18 inches of rain per year. 9 inches of it is rain, and then the other 9 inches is whatever the snow equivalent is, that when it melts, it makes 9 inches. So they knew they were going to have snow in the winter that melted in the spring. They knew the monsoons usually they come in July, not in June and in May. It hasn't stopped raining yet. It's very interesting. But they knew they would have rain coming again sometime during the summer. They were exquisite water managers. They would capture the water in those great big Oya jars. They would channel it. They would collect it into depressions. If you stop at the Farview sites on the way back out of the park, there's a big reservoir there. And then also they would farm, setting up terraces that went down the natural depressions and drainages. You notice this is not a very flat space, and there's a lot of places where it goes down, and you can see terraces, rock walls in those places, and so they were terrace farming instead of those great big fields of corn that you might think of. So they would plant that corn, beans, and squash kind of companion together. It wouldn't just be corn and then beans and then squash, because the corn, as it grows up, will provide some shelter for the other things that are growing underneath it, like the beans and the squash. So, okay, we got the soil, we got the water, we got enough if we manage it, we can do the farming. And the climate. We're at 7,000 feet. You're in what's called high desert up here. And, growing corn in the Midwest, they're like 800 feet, 1,000 feet. If you get to Kansas, you might get a couple thousand feet. But we're pretty high up. But what the interesting part about this particular geologic formation is we're technically not a mesa. We lied to you. But you notice when you came in the park, you went up and up and up and up and up, and you kind of got up to where the lodge is, and you kind of coasted all the way down to Chapin Mesa here. So we're actually what's called a cuesta. And a cuesta is not perfectly flat, but usually tilted in one direction or another. And all the cuestas in Mesa Verde that are south-facing, they're canted about 6 degrees to the south. And that's just enough to give the farmers an extra 30 days of growing season up here at 7,000 feet. Now, imagine how many years of research and measuring and things that went into us figuring that out. Those ancestral Pueblo people didn't have those advantages. They had to know their environment so well to understand that this was a good place to farm. And they were here farming for centuries. I'm going to talk a little bit along the way about how intimately they knew their environment and how ingenious they were. Okay, so we are going to go down. We're going to go through the gate here that I will be locking behind us. Is there anyone that's not?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I still need my voice today. Okay, so here we are, and we are in a little tiny alcove before we get up to the big alcove. And the way these alcoves are formed is that the ancestral Pueblo people did not excavate them and create them. They're actually created by water. And water is working in two ways here. It's working chemically and it's working mechanically. So the chemical part of it is that rainwater is ever so slightly acid. And so sandstone, which is a very porous rock, allows the water to travel through the sandstone. It won't drip out, but it's in there. And as it's moving through, it's going to start, that little bit of acid is going to start breaking the bonds of calcium that are holding the bits of sand together. And if you look over your head, all this white scaly stuff over here and on the walls here, that's the calcium leaching out. Okay, so this is a process still in the works. The other piece of it is the mechanical part is with that water in there. In the wintertime, when water freezes, it expands. When it melts in the spring, it contracts. And you've got this expansion, contraction going on season after season for thousands of years. You start to drop out. Bits of rocks, boulders, things start dropping out of the ceiling. And that's what creates these alcoves. In fact, if you turn around and look, you're going to see, especially over there, there's a lot of flat, flaky rock, sandstone right there. That's all fallen out within the past year. So this is a process still in motion. And this is why you are not going into Spruce Tree House right now, is because we've had some rock fall out of that ceiling. Now there's a crack in that ceiling that has been known. They tried to fix it in the 20s, the 40s, the 60s. Hopefully by the end of the year we'll have a contract that will use 21st century engineering from mining technology to be able to use the materials and the methods to actually bolt that piece that's trying to break off back to the rock face itself. If you're here next year, if you're in the neighborhood or anything, if that work does start, I think that's going to be interesting unto itself, how they're going to be able to do that. So if it all works, in 2 years, you'll be able to go back down into Spruce Tree House. So fingers crossed. Okay. So the water, though, when it's in the sandstone and it's trickling, it keeps moving through the sandstone until it hits a roadblock. And in this case here, the roadblock is shale. It's a rock that's very horizontal in its structure, doesn't let the water through. So you can see this kind of layer of gray, flaky rock right at the bottom, and you can see there's water seeping out of here. And it's called a seep spring. And you've got moss here. Where do you see moss in the desert except where it's cool and has water all the time? And so you will often see that at the seep spring. We have a seep spring here. There's another big one in the back of this alcove. So this was a great place to live because it had some great water. We also wonder that towards the end, when they started putting the tunnel in and these other patches and passageways to get through this dwelling, were they it was close to the end when most people were migrating out, were they trying to protect that water source? We don't know. They didn't leave us any written records, but when you kind of start to walk through it and look through it, you get some ideas about what was going on here. So we're going to go read some stories in the masonry and in the architecture up here and see what was going on. Okay. All right, one more check-in about that ladder. Up. is to not lean on any walls, not touch any bricks. The wall behind you is a rebuilt wall. Whoops, in a location where a wall, the bottoms of the wall had been found, but that was rebuilt 100 years ago. So I wouldn't trust it. So once we get here, now we get a chance to kind of look at the building, the architecture and things like that, and start to tell some stories about what may or may not have happened here. So what's interesting about being here is that you can see, in most places, they didn't just build this all at once. You can see that it's done in stages, the style, even of the size of the building blocks. They may be long and thin in some places, other places more like a bread loaf. So different styles, different ways of doing it. You can see walls sometimes in the mortar, they're little rocks stuck in a row in the mortar. And that's a different style of building than not putting the rocks in the mortar. So that tells us a little bit. And then if we look a little bit closer, we can see that like one building was built here, then the other one, because those are not tied together. It's two walls that are right next to each other instead. So the other thing, and this is why it's called balcony house, is not that you're up on a big balcony, but actually that there are features on these buildings that we have called balconies. And there's one, you can see one here. So you can see these beams that are creating the ceiling for the lower floor and the floor for the upper floor stick out further than you would normally need for the structure. And so then they used sticks and logs. This fuzzy stuff right here is juniper bark, and then mud on top of it. There's another one on top right over here when you first came in. There's one on that same building kind of looking over the cliff too. So was there ones over here where the logs still stick out? Maybe, we don't know. You know, it's one of those perishable things that tends to kind of erode and drop away fairly quickly, so we don't know. These are well preserved because this alcove is relatively low, and so it doesn't get a lot of water and snow and things in it too. So, what do you think they use those balconies for? Yeah.
Maybe storage.
Maybe storage? Growing things? Sure. What else? Drying things?
Meats and skins.
Okay.
There are naughty kids out there?
Naughty kids, timeouts. You know, we don't know. It could have been all of these things. What's kind of interesting is that it may also have been used to transit between rooms. I've had the chance to go into both these buildings with the archaeologists. And in this building on this side, the one closer to me, there is a hatch in the ceiling that could use a ladder to get from the first floor to the second floor. There's no hatch in the further building to get from the first floor to the second floor. So maybe you went in, went up the hatch, came out this door, went across the balcony to get into that other storage location. So, and I'm sure there was multiple purposes. You don't have a lot of real estate here, so I imagine you don't build any one thing that's only used for one thing. You're going to be using it for many different purposes as well. So, but that's what gives this place its name, balconies. And we suspect that many places also had balconies. They just didn't withstand 800 years of time more than anything else. So that's kind of the stories we kind of like. What would people do? You know, because we get the great fortune of being here all summer long with these dwellings, and we get a little bit of time when we're not talking. We're kind of, I wonder what was going on there, kind of thing. And we've got several things here that make you wonder what was going on. Many things that were built here were very late in the occupation. They were very late 1200s, including that hatchway we just came through. There's going to be another passageway we're going to go through behind these walls here. That was actually smaller and was harder to get through. And then the tunnel that we go through at the very end also was built very late in the occupation here too. So at some point, something was going on here that they were starting to wall off or divide things. This great big wall down at the end here, you notice the only real connection between this side and that side is either that little window in the wall there or having to go around the way we're going to go. You can see to the right of it that there's a spot where there used to be a door and they blocked it up. So at some point they were changing what the purposes of rooms were, the purposes of space were. So for anyone that's ever been to a coach dwelling or seen some of the dwellings or seen pictures of the dwellings or whatever, do you notice anything missing? There you go. Those subterranean round rooms known as kivas, there are none here. There are also no scorch marks anywhere indicating there were fires here. No cooking fires, no fires of any kind on this side of that wall. So we wonder, what was this used for? Got any ideas about that?
Maybe welcoming?
Maybe welcoming, although this was not the entrance. So where the exit we go out is also the entrance. So this would have been the far end of the dwelling.
The king went to.
No kings, yes, I can see you.
Would it have been bedrooms where people slept?
Maybe bedrooms,
Or could it have been just storage?
could have been just storage, sure. So, you know, we kind of, but we've got a lot of floor space here. And I think about, I have 43 people here. If we all got in a circle, we could dance here for hours. You know? Was this a storage space? Was it a ceremonial space? Some of you peeked inside that room at the end. There's a bunch of sticks that go across there. Was that the place where they put the turkeys to roost at night? Because they kept turkeys. You know, maybe the turkeys were out here during the day, so it kind of kept them a little contained, although turkeys do fly. But not gracefully, but they fly. So anyhow, so we don't really know what happened here. But we do know we've got different styles of masonry, different buildings at times. If you kind of look over here, this wall, it's maybe not as neatly done. Were they in a hurry to get some of this wall up over here? Or was somebody learning how to do this? We don't know. Yeah.
Do they have any reason to defend themselves or their?
So it's possible, so the issue in terms of defending themselves from enemies, my co-workers who have military experience tell me this is not the place to be, or any of these alcoves, because there's no escape route. There's no, you know, you get pinned in here and you're here. Now, there are other ways to defend things, other than with bows and arrows or weapons. Simply using your structure indicates that there's some kind of defense of that. We also see it a bit in Longhouse, which is unfortunately Little Mesa, where you're not going to get this here, but the building is the second largest brick dwelling. It goes from one end of the alcove all the way to the other end of the alcove. It's got a beautiful seep spring in the back. And the only way you could get to that seep spring is if you're going through somebody else's house to get there. So, you know, I'm gonna guess unless you have great relations with your neighbors, you don't go waltzing in there when you need a stick of butter or something like that. So, you know, there are other ways to kind of defend things. And certainly water would be something that would defend things. Again, these kind of restrictions to access happened late in the 1200s. That means many people were gone. Maybe farming in general wasn't working anymore because you didn't have enough people here. Possibly things had been largely hunted, and so you didn't have a lot of opportunities for hunting options. And people probably towards the end were getting a little desperate. So it's very possible. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go up the ladder, up these steps. We're going to go through another narrow spot. Again, take your sunglasses off because you actually have some steps to walk down. The archaeologists will say that was storage. Okay, so we've got more than, and then every family, besides a couple of those rectangular shaped rooms, would have a round room or a kiva. Okay, so these kivas, though, have a piece missing out of them. Does anybody know what the piece is that's missing? The roof, exactly. These are not hot tubs. They are not cisterns or spas or anything like that. But these are actually living space, family gathering space. So when you put a roof on top of them, they're probably the coolest place to be in the summertime and probably the warmest place to be in the wintertime. The way they built these roofs is actually kind of unique, and people who are the descendants of the ancestral Pueblo people still build kivas, and they still build them in much the same way. And in fact, the roofs, if you ever get inside a Navajo hogan, are also built in a similar fashion. So the way they do it is that you've got 6 short pillars here. And so they would take a set of logs, and they would take a log and set one from connect this pillar to this pillar. Next log connects these 2 pillars, another log to that pillar, so that you have a chain of logs around the pillar. Now that you have joints over the pillar, the next layer of logs crosses over that joint. And you do another circle of logs, and then you cross it back over again. So it's like you're weaving with logs to build up this roof. So you start to fill in more of it with smaller logs, smaller sticks, and then put juniper bark on the top, and then you would mud the top, but you would leave a square opening in the center. And with that square opening, there'd be a ladder, and that's how you got in and out. So not only was down below living space, family gathering space, places to tell stories in the winter, places to weave, places to make pots, but also the tops of the kivas become living space as well. They're like big patios. And I think about if I'm going to weave a pair of sandals, or I'm going to teach my granddaughters how to make pots, I'm going to need some light and space and air. And if you put roofs on these, it's not very light in there. All these would have roofs, they have small doors. You know, that top of the kiva is just because it's just as important a living space as the inside of any of these rooms. So every kiva is set up and engineered. So I promised to talk a little bit about engineering. One of them, I'm sure if you've been admiring the masonry, is that we got corners at 90 degrees. We have walls that are still standing after 800, 900 years. And the ground swirl. We just say, oh, I'm gonna wait till you're gone. But the kivas are engineered, because if you put a lid on this, just one square opening at the top, and this center hole in both of these would be the fire pit. So you build a fire in there, and you're gonna, in no time, have an extremely smoky room, because you've got to set up some air circulation. So all these kivas are engineered for air circulation. So each one of these has a kind of square, this one's kind of square, this one's very square, opening here. And those are connected to a shaft that goes down the wall of this outside the kiva, and that shaft ends in this opening here at the bottom of the kiva. There's one on either side. And so what happens is when you build that fire, that warm air starts to draw the cooler air down through that shaft and comes out this opening at the bottom. Now, without this deflector wall, it'll blow right across your fire, and that's not helpful either. So you'll have a deflector wall here that when the air comes, it forces it to circulate around the kiva, and now you set up some vortexes that help carry that smoke up through the ceiling. So, this particular one, and somebody asked about it already, so I wanted to make sure you point this out, is that usually when you see kivas built, this air shaft is pointed to the south. This particular alcove is oriented northeast. It's a little unusual in terms of the location, but it's a great alcove. It's got a spring, you know, so they built in here. So they tried to point their intake as far south as they could. I'm going to guess it was too far under the alcove, and they weren't getting enough draw. So we got a remodel here. So they moved over here, dropped the shaft, opened it up here, moved their deflector wall over, and then they have the fire pit. This little circle on the other side of the fire pit, normally they're all aligned. Normally you've got the shaft comes down through the opening, the fire pit, and then normally this would have been, it's right where it would have been if that air shaft was working. Since they remodeled and moved the air shaft, they did not move this hole. They left it here. This little small hole is your second Hopi word of the day. It's called a sipapu. So kiva is a Hopi word, sipapu is a Hopi word, and both kivas have those little holes. And these people have a belief that they are of migration. It's just part of their culture to migrate. But they also believe that they have migrated from other worlds through passageways to the next world. Many of them believe this is either the fourth or fifth world, but generally the fourth world that we're in right now. And so what better place to commemorate a passageway where your people have come from than in the room where your family gathers? And so if you see a kiva without a sipapu, it's probably because we have filled in the floor to help protect it. So that's what, this is basically your kiva structure. Imagine this is really all one great big patio. What a beautiful place to live. What a beautiful view. You know, and you know, the alcove does afford a lot of protection from the elements. In the summer, when the sun rides higher in the sky, you get more shade. In the winter, the sun's gonna ride lower in the sky, and it's actually gonna fall on these walls and help heat them up and actually keep it somewhat more comfortable than being outside the alcove as well, keep it warm in here. So it's you know, got a lot of advantages to it. But I also think people have always picked the nicest place to be. You know, you picked your home for a reason, and maybe it doesn't have a view, but my husband used to be a whitewater rafting guide, and we go rafting off and on the San Juan or the Colorado or the Green Rivers here in the Four Corners area. And we were on the San Juan one time, and there is a dwelling, just an easy quarter-mile walk from the river's edge. It's called River House, if any of you have ever been on the San Juan River. You can four-wheel drive down to it now, I think, too. But we walked over to see it. It was a hot July day, and we're like, you know, let's go have our lunch on the other side of the river where there's shade. So we get in the raft, my husband oars us across, and he says, I'll tie up the boat and bring the food, you find the place to sit. So I'm climbing up the side of the canyon wall there. It's pretty slopey, it's easy to walk, and I find a spot. There's a nice rock shelf to sit on, and it's got an overhang, and I was like, this is it. So my husband's coming up at the lunch, and he says, so I said to him, so do you think the people at River House ever actually came over here to just enjoy the view or something? And he looks at me, rolls his eyes, and says, look above your head. And above my head was a big panel of petroglyphs and pictographs all over my head there. So it's like, yes, indeed they did. So people do pick beautiful places to live. And that's, you know, we see it time and time again where we see people, sometimes they'll move from an area and other people will come in 100 years later. They'll build in the same place. You know, if you go to some cities that are much older, like some of the big cities in Europe, there are layers of Roman and Visigoth and all, you know, there's all kinds of layers of civilization that have gone on top of each other because it was a good place to live. We're going to take a couple minutes to kind of walk through this area here. For those of you that didn't get to see it yet, some of you found it, there is a handprint on this back wall. It is not, let me describe it to you because you'll never find it otherwise. It's not somebody put paint on their hand and smacked it on the wall. Rather, it's somebody put their hand on the wall, had a straw of some kind with some kind of paint or pigment in it, and spit it around their hand. So you will see a carved rectangle in the sandstone, and the lower left corner of that rectangle, the handprint is right below that. In this first room here, you'll also see original plaster, and it's got some triangles in it, series of 3 triangles. We wonder if that represents, where'd they go? The La Plata Mountains, they're there. You can barely see them right now for the clouds, but the La Plata Mountains. We don't know, but you know, it's kind of fun to sit here and wonder and speculate. I will meet you around on the other side there.
See, this side, if you can see it. Maybe the next tower. Look for the handprint.
That's what I'm trying to do.
You probably have to get down a little further.
But if you are up on top
Maybe I'm thinking of, oh, there it is.
It's fine. Go down about 1 inch.
Left. The lower left.
I'm not
Video link.
1 inch,
The rectangle.
not 2 feet.
Under the lower left corner.
Doing a good job filming. Thank you. You're letting me take pictures.
24, what does that mean?
Yep, there's the 3 triangles.
What does 24 mean? 25?
Probably a designation for archaeologists. Designation of some kind, so that's kind of cool. There's your millstone.
It looks like it broke on one of their tents.
Yep. Yep. Get out of here. Make sure you get closer so you can get the.
Where?
Once you come through.
If everyone's okay with that. If you're not okay with being 10 minutes late, you can go ahead and start on up. But I just have a couple more things to say. So one of the things, there are two things that I want to leave you with. One of them is the first one is that this place probably had about 24 to 30 people that lived here. And we do that by counting what we think about the household size may or may not have been, and then a ratio against how many kivas we find. Because of the number of rectangle rooms to kivas, we think that maybe it was a little bit more than what we would normally think, but somewhere in there. Not a lot of people, but it's a small space. And imagine if you are here with as many people as I have now, and you're not all listening to a talkative ranger, but in fact you're going about daily life. What kind of sounds might you hear?
Not really. A lot of sounds.
What?
Not really a lot of sounds.
A lot of sound, no?
No.
How about people talking? Babies crying, turkeys gobbling. They kept dogs, probably for rodent control, dogs barking. And then the thing that you would hear every day is right behind you here, the tools are right here, are manos and metates. The metate is the big lower stone, and the mano is what would go in your hand, the smaller stone, and that would be to grind corn. Corn was very much a staple in this family, and so you can bet there was some woman in the family that was grinding corn every day to feed her family. So you would hear that ringing of the stone on stone, that grinding of that corn. And again, because we spent a lot of time here, you start thinking about, what would that be like to have to grind that corn every day? And I think about what a tedious job after a while. And oh my gosh. And then I thought, well, what would I do? What do you do? If you got a job, you're not really looking forward to it, but you got to do it, and no one else is going to do it for you. What do you do? Sing? What else do you do? Meditate? Okay. What else? Chat? Sure. Complain? Okay. Maybe can't hear that over the ringing of the stone. I don't know. But yeah, exactly. You turn on the music, you sing, you get a friend to come help you. You get, you listen to books on tape or podcasts. Somebody's reading you a story. You're going to do other things to kind of make that time pass. So I thought about it, and I thought, especially some of these other dwellings, they're going to be out on the kiva roofs. They're going to be there, and I thought, I'd get two of my sisters. We all get our stuff together. We get that grinding going. Nobody can hear us gossiping. But then at some point, maybe we want to hit a rhythm, and maybe we have a song that keeps us in rhythm. So you have music here, too. And so I encourage you to think about this place, not as an abandoned ruin, but actually to think about this place and any other place you're going to visit, Cliff Palace or any of the places on the Mesa Top Loop or the Farview sites or anywhere else in the Four Corners. Think of them as thriving villages. People lived in these cliffs at least for a century. They lived here, they thrived, they raised their kids here, although I can't figure out toddlers in here yet, but I'll come up with some idea.
That's why they built the kivas.
Well, the other thought I had was that people were still living on top of the mesas while they were down here, and I thought, well, okay, people with disabilities can't get down here. Maybe small children, it's not a good idea to come in. So maybe the aunties are up on top raising the little ones until they're old enough to bring them down. I don't know. But also kids, what you raise them in, they get adjusted to it. But anyhow, they were here. They solved problems. They fed their families. They had good years. They had bad years. But for many hundreds of years, all these places had people living here and doing very well. Are there any other questions?
They have burials in here?
There are burials that are sometimes found in what's called the midden. So what you need to do is adjust your mindset about what we consider waste. So pots, broken pots, blown out sandals, things that don't work anymore, were often tossed over the side of the alcove here. And that creates what's called a midden. And for archaeologists, it provides kind of a reverse chronology of what were they eating, what kind of bones do you find, what did their pots look like, and things like that. How was their basketry weaving, what did their sandals look like, things like that. You've got a reverse chronology there. So sometimes that's also what they did with their loved ones who passed away. Now, it wasn't toss grandma off the cliff. But in fact, there were burials found there. And, you know, culturally, maybe it was a way to keep your loved ones close by. It's very dry out here, so you don't have to worry about if you were trying to do a burial in Louisiana or someplace, but it's very dry here. And I think about it from a practical perspective. I mean, you've walked around, you've seen things here. Places where you're going to be able to dig are probably where you're going to be farming. So the other places that would be easy to dig would be in that midden that has been accumulating over a period of time. Other questions? Okay, the last step of the big adventure. So again, do take off your sunglasses when you're going through the tunnel itself. It's a little bit easier to see. Be sure to look up. See that floor that's above you, and take your backpacks off, take things off your hips. I already dropped my radio once because I left it on my hip instead of in front of me. And then make geometry work for you. If your shoulders don't go straight through, just go a little bit to one side or the other.
There you are.
Okay, I'll go first.
We're at Sun Viewpoint, the date AD, old-fashioned style, but we're gonna walk down here because apparently there's cliff dwellings down here. Oh wow, there's cliff dwellings everywhere. So I'm gonna show you. Oh wow. So
It was not like that the first two
right there,
you're seeing yourself.
and there's some right there. Some right there. Oh, there's even more on this section. Some right there. And some all the way down there. And here is the canyon right down here. This is like the most dwellings I've seen out of the whole time I was here. Sorry, I thought I pressed something and accidentally shut it off. But yes. Oh yes, old-fashioned stairs. Of course, can't forget those. Oh, here's Cooper. Huh. This is actually the most cliff dwellings I actually seen. Some right there. So they're like everywhere. There's like some all the way down there. And now, as you may know if you ever watched this, we're in Mesa Verde. Yes, there is some tops. And yes, I just realized there's some up there. And so, and as you may know, where? You're pointing down.
No, do you see that cave right there? That arch kind of?
Yeah, I see that. I saw that.
Yeah, all the condos and this is
So anyway, an old farmer came along. Like, yeehaw, he was like finding his cows.
Go out there, not yourself.
I did do that, Cooper. And he came across one of these dwellings. And so that's how it became historical. So archaeologists explored. I know that one is still unexplored to today. So like, so if they explore it soon, they will report it on the news, I think. I think if I wonder if we're standing on top of the cliff dwelling, despite the fact that we can be like on the perfect plan where we are right now. So, ew, that's a nice flower right down there. But it's like where I used or I rest over. So I'm gonna bring you a pie. Give you a little suck. So I hope you had enjoyed this part. Now I'm going to see you in the next part. is where they sharpen their tools. So over here, there's a lot more sharpening tools and petroglyphs here at Chaco Canyon. So, but anyway, that's just where everyone hung out and stuff. Oh wow, you can go all in this place. Why is it upside down? Okay, sorry about that. It was upside down. Oh wow. That's ow! I just bumped my head. This is fascinating. Oh, look at that. I have to get down. Looks like they use this section for like, storage or whatever. I know what this is. They used to grind corn right here. Looks like there's a second story on this. Gotta go find my dad.